Hey friends, my name's Aaron Ciotti. That was a smooth one. Everybody calls me Ciotti. Welcome to Fresh Hell Friday. The Mobula7 DJI O4 rig problems have begun. And we're going to dive into them tonight. Happy Valentine's Day, you filthy animals. Let me hit a couple of buttons here. Patrons, you guys have a link, an early link to an edit. First DJI O4 edit from the first two batteries on the Mobula7 O4 over on Discord, on the Patreon, what's it called? Patreon chat? Patron hangout? Patron hangout. That's what it's called. There's a link to it. It's pretty much done. When I couldn't sleep in the middle of the night last night, I blitzed through a quick edit because I wanted to have a bunch of this footage in Premiere to show you guys the problem that I've been talking about, where the flight footage kind of looks like a flip book because you're missing frames when you record at 60 frames a second or 100 frames a second. and then you edit down into like standard 30 frames a second, you just lose frames in between. At 60 frames a second, you lose every other frame. So if the camera is going like this, you're going to get a frame and you're going to miss a frame. You're going to get a frame, you're going to miss a frame. And so it makes it go like, and at 100 frames, it's even worse because you've like got a frame, no frame, no frame, got a frame, no frame, no frame, got a frame. This is one of the inherent problems with flying through the same camera that collects your HD footage. And there's really not much. I mean, the closest thing that we have to a solution is if you edit with your sequence settings at 60 frames, which I don't really like to do. And then when you export in 60 frames, you upload that to YouTube, and YouTube will play back at 60 frames. If you've got a monitor or a TV or something that's 60 hertz, which not everybody does. Any monitors, any TVs, anything that's playing back at 30 hertz, that's 30 frames a second. Even if the file on YouTube is in 60, it's only going to play back in 30, and you're going to have that same problem all over again. And so, yeah. This is a problem that we had with the footage coming out of the walk snail system, but it wasn't as noticeable because the quality is not as good. It's kind of interesting. Now that the image quality is so good on O4, this becomes very noticeable. Only really, it's mainly noticeable with freestyle, because we're moving a lot, namely yaw. We're doing a lot of yawing, a lot of jawing, and when you yaw, the entire screen shifts, right? Like when you roll, it's just the outsides that move a lot, and so it's not that noticeable. When you pitch, it's pretty noticeable because the whole screen shoves up and down. But for whatever reason, like we don't tend to pitch a lot, right? We yaw a lot. And so, yeah, I also hate editing, and I hate doing everything at 60 frames a second. It's so much like less cinematic, and it's just, I don't like it. 30 frames is what looks really good to me. You know, this is like one of the main arguments to having a separate action camera and then a separate FPV system. You set the action camera to 30 frames a second, and you're good to go. You don't have any of those skipped frames in the middle. Again, I'll show you guys in a little bit what that looks like, and you know, why it's just sort of annoying. Is this me being picky? Yeah, for sure. But when I show it to you, you'll be like, oh, okay. Actually, I'm going to show it to you right now. So this is the quick little edit that I did here. And so if I go full screen, and I'm going to fast forward up here. So let me turn this down so I don't get copyright donged. Okay, so this is footage that's 1080, 100 frames a second, so this makes it super obvious. And we're going to come up here, and so this is going to be at full speed. All right, so this is full speed, and so when I go a frame forward, it doesn't look that bad right now, right? But now, see how I'm moving faster? Look how much everything moves in between each frame, right? There's a big gap in between each frame. Big gap, big gap. Look at Sage's car here, ready? It moves from there all the way over to there. The computer is shitting its pants. Come on, god damn it. All right, let's try this again. There we go. So I'm yawing a bunch here, right? Look how much the car moves. It moves all the way there to there, and there's no motion blur in between to connect it. It's just a big jump. Everything just jumps, jump, 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 jump. And there is motion blur, right? Like, look at all this motion blur that there is. But there's not enough motion blur to connect, to make up for the missing frames, right? So this is at 100% speed. When I dropped it, and again, this sequence is in 30 frames a second. When I fast forward, I'm going to move forward a little bit here. Now I've gone to 50% speed, all right? And so now we're losing half as many frames. So again, watch Sage's car. We've still got some motion blur. Watch how much the car moves. It still moves a good chunk, right? But it's not as much. There's a lot less missing fields in between each frame here. All right, and now I'm going to go all the way up here, and I'm going to drop it down to 30% speed, which 100 frames at 30% is down to, you don't lose any frames. And so now, like, the motion blur connects each frame. And so you see the jumps in between each frame are a lot smaller because we are capturing all of the frames now. And so here's what that looks like. Here's what each jump looks like. Ready? So this is at 100%. Jump, 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 jump. Watch how this smooths out. 50%. Look how much smoother that is. It's a little bit, it does look a little bit smoother because we're going to 50% speed, but hopefully you can see how, like, the jumps in between the frames are a lot less. Now you're going to really be able to notice it when I drop from 50% down to 30%. Ready? Watch this. Here it comes. See that? See that massive difference? And I mean, we're only going from 50% to 30%, but it's those jumps in between those frames. It's those missing frames that make it look so much smoother. I planned on doing some more testing with this today and flying around in 30 frames a second. But unfortunately, some issues have arisen, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. But let me say hi to Curtis Hayes. He was the first one in the chat. Spaceman Spiff, Nate Adams, Chuck P, LOL the Kiddison, Captain FPV, Nate Adams, RC Thrills, Matthew Wegner, Douglas 6, Levster, Brandon's Baked Beans, 70, J Deegs, RC Thrills, Northern Tier, Chaser FPV, Crom, Uriel, Skyotic, Juiced, Uriel, Islander, Notice, Curtis Hayes, CXB. What's up, everybody? If you want to talk directly to me, type CiottiFPV into your chat message or do a super chat. If you want to support me so that I can keep doing this full time and keep testing lots and lots and lots of stuff, head on over to CiottiFPV.com and click all the buttons, my friends. Patreon helps me out the most. You get the most benefits. $3 a month. That's only 10 cents a day. And I guarantee you that I will save you at least $3 a month in time, effort, and or just not buying things that suck. So help me test more stuff by supporting me, and then at some point you'll be thinking about buying something, and I'll be like, no, don't buy that, and I'll save you $40, $50, $60, $70, $80, and then your $3 a month was well spent, wasn't it? Etsy has a whole bunch of fun stuff that you can buy. Fiverr, you can work one-on-one with me, treat yourself, learn a lot in a short period of time. Teespring's got a whole bunch of apparel and other random stuff that you can get. The newest item up there is a beanie hat, a winter little beanie scully cap. PayPal if you want to support me directly, but you know that super chats get 30% stolen from Google. And then lots of affiliate links. Change your bookmarks over to someone's affiliate link so that you can support people without even thinking about it. You have to hit an affiliate link within like a week of you checking out, and then when you check out on the website, it clears the affiliate link out. If you're using, or anybody you know is using Honey, delete that shit. It's a terrible program that's stealing money from content creators. It's awful. It steals content creators' affiliate links even if it doesn't get you a discount. It's real bad. I have affiliate links to Amazon, Get FPV, Pyro Drone, Race Day Quads, Newbie Drone, We Bleed FPV, Beta FPV, FPV Cycle, Hazingi, Oh my God, Brain 3D, HD0, Flywheel, WeMax, Banggood, Camera Butter, and AliExpress. Do it! Support me and I'll keep doing cool shit, helping you guys out. In the chat, Uriel tagged me and said, I took a great dump today. Curtis Hayes says, is more motion blur between frames caused when running a snap-on ND filter? All an ND filter does is allow the shutter to open up for a longer period of time if you're using auto shutter. I'm not using auto shutter on any of this stuff that you've been watching. I am locking the shutter speed in. And so for me, the only thing that an ND filter would do is it would allow me to run the shutter speed slower. None of the problems that I'm having would be solved with an ND filter. I am locking the shutter speed as slow as it can be for the frame rate that I'm flying and filming at. The problem is that in order to get low latency, we have to fly at 100 frames a second. And then so when you put it into a sequence that's 30 frames a second, or you upload to YouTube at 30 frames a second, or it plays back on a monitor or TV or whatever that's 30 frames a second, you lose those frames in between. So the solution is to fly around at 30 frames a second. But unfortunately, as Rosser very kindly tested for us, where the hell is it? Hold on. Here it is. Why did it stop playing? There it is. Unfortunately, when we go to 30 frames a second, the latency skyrockets. The latency goes all the way up to 6194 or 6497, depending if you're 4K or 1080. And so flying around in 30 frames a second is quite challenging because of the latency. And so this is just a problem for us. Like, this is just a problem. This is the problem of having the same camera be your HD and your FPV. The same camera, the same sensor, right? And there's really no solution to this. The closest thing that we have to a solution is flying around at 60 frames a second. The latency doesn't jump up that bad. And then editing in 60 frames a second and uploading to YouTube in 60 frames a second and hoping that everybody that watches either changes the quality settings to 60 or YouTube's automatic thing does it for them. Your file sizes double. You know, like when you export that footage, it's in 60 instead of 30. It is literally twice as big. Your uploads double. Everything doubles, right? Which is kind of annoying. And like I said earlier, I don't like the way that 60 frames a second looks. I like the way that 30 frames a second looks a lot better. That is a personal preference kind of thing. The biggest problem is those gaps in between the frames when we're at the lowest latency 100 frames a second mode. And so, yeah. This is something that we, you know, with freestyle FPV having a lot of fast movement, this becomes an issue for us. An issue that becomes more noticeable with the higher quality cameras, right? We actually have this issue a little bit with analog. Analog is 60 frames a second, but we don't notice it because it looks like ass. So like the gaps in between frames, everything's all blurry anyway, so you don't even notice it. Super interesting that this is such a that this is like jumping out and becoming so obvious all of a sudden. Not super surprising, but yeah. Red Plomps. Red Plomp. He says, one of my motors on my 75mm Whoop is louder and grindier than the others. Testing them on Betaflight without the props, I can see that one motor is 6,000 RPM slower. Is it repairable? Not really. You can try to pull it apart. which is difficult in and of itself, and you can clean it all out. You can also just throw some like motor lube at it. The best possible lube is going to be a dry lube. Mountain bikers use it on their chains. Any kind of like very thin lube is going to work, but it's going to get flung out. Best bet is just to replace the motor. Hopefully it's a motor that you can buy just one individual replacement, and it'll cost you like $10. I don't recommend that you grease these motors because they spin so fast. They throw the grease everywhere, and then the grease attracts dirt, and it usually makes the situation worse. But yeah, those are your options there. Uriel says, as long as CiottiFPV men seance me, I'm alive or on the run. Christopher Blackledge says, hello, my Sky Boys and CiottiFPV. I'm here. I hate missing it, but when I do still watch, and right now I'm driving, you know, all the fun things you're not supposed to try at home. Levster says 1080 30 more latency than 4K 30. I don't think so. Usually when the oh yeah, look at that. I'll be damned. 1080 30 is slightly higher. You're not going to notice this difference though. This like 3 milliseconds. With the latencies up this high, you're not going to notice 3 or 4 milliseconds. That's interesting though, that it is. I guess what that means is that they've really optimized everything for 4K. That's the only way that makes any sense. Well, no, it's just at 30 frames. The rest of them, no, yeah, they all have slightly higher or the same latency at 1080. That's interesting. Yeah, I guess they really have it optimized for to run in 4K. What's up, Rays? So, yeah, that's the deal. What else is happening? All right, so let's, since I am caught up on chat, hey, this is going to be a little bit of a shorter live stream because I want to go hang out with Maggie and get some dinner and whatnot. Islander RPV says, would a whoop that's tuned somewhat aggressively, say Master Multiplier at 1.5 or 1.6, behave any differently than a stock tune in very windy conditions? It's actually a really good question. When you push the sliders up, what that is doing is that it's allowing the PID loop to attack the problems sooner, earlier, quicker. It doesn't affect how much power it puts. That's what the PID sum determines. But by the fact that it's going to start pushing against the problem earlier, it appears to push harder because it pushes earlier and then that push builds up, right? Like you push a little bit, like, yeah, it just builds up. It can't instantly push hard enough. And so you've got a windy day and the wind is creating a weird aerodynamic situation. And that's making the build want to do this. With more aggressive PIDs, every single time the wind makes it move around and go off of set point is where your sticks are. So let's say you're cruising straight ahead. Your sticks are dead center. Set point is dead ahead. The wind starts blowing. It pushes it up, pushes it, it wiggles, wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. With an aggressive PID tune, every single time that the wind pushes on it, earlier than a loose PID tune, it's going to push against that to try to keep it solid. If the tune is aggressive enough to keep it dead solid, depending on how nasty the wind is, it's going to be pushing hard. And that's what we want because we don't want it to flop all over the damn place. If the PID tune is backed off enough that it's not responding quick enough to keep the damn thing from bobbling around, then that power is not going to build up and it's not going to use as much power. So you're going to see the wind pushing it all around, but it's not going to create as much motor heat, right? Because it's not pushing early enough to take care of it. A rig that never, ever, ever goes off set point and it's always absolutely dialed that's going to have a PID tune, especially like in the wind, right? That's going to have a PID tune that's very aggressive. That aggressive PID tune is going to eat batteries, and it's going to push hard and create motor heat because it has to in order to keep it absolutely locked in. There are situations like in the wind where it's going to want to move around. And the more aggressive your PID tune, the more battery you're using, the more motor heat that gets created because it's staying locked in. If you have a middle of the road PID, this is why we don't want PID tunes that are overly aggressive. We want PID tunes that are exactly aggressive enough and no more. Because if we push them any farther, it's going to create additional heat for no benefit. So like the perfect PID tune is a PID tune that you can take out and fly in whatever the heaviest wind that you want to be able to fly is in, and with the most banged up motors and propellers that you want to fly with. This is why a lot of us tune with beat up propellers, and we tune in shitty weather. We tune in wind. Because if you can get the tune just perfect so that it can handle both of those two things and it never goes off set point, or it goes off set point just a little bit because that's kind of okay, that is where you kind of want it. So like my Cinewhoops, for example, they don't have great tunes, but every single bit of footage that comes out of the Cinewhoop, I put through Real Steady Go. And that takes care of all that wobbling and shit. It's for it's the tunes on my Cinewhoops are like that for two reasons. The main reason is that the old school Cinesplorer frames are not stiff enough. But the other reason that I realized after a while is that it gets more runtime this way. If I'm dropping altitude and it's bobbling around a little bit, it's literally using less battery energy. If I was able to push the tune up further, it would push earlier and harder, and it would eat more of the battery, and I would literally get less runtime. And so you want to push your tune like far enough, but not too far. The more chilled out, I'm doing it the wrong way. The more chilled out your tune is, the more runtime you're going to get. The more aggressive your tune, the more on edge it's going to be. And when it's on edge, it also is a problem because as you beat the rig up and there's more vibrations coming in, it's going to push against those vibrations earlier and eat more of the battery. And worst case scenario, it's going to push too hard, overcorrect, and then overcorrect the other way, and that's the oscillation that you hear when they try to fly away on their own. So, great question, dude. Euro says last remark was a bit serious. That's okay. Everyday with Bruno says Merry Cho Day. And Maggie, thanks for sharing your hunk of love with us. Alley Cat says, hey, happy Valentine's Day. Happy Valentine's Day to you as well. Denzel the Terrible says, Kaios tag CiottiFPV with your question. I'm going to look up and look for Kaikos' question. They said, when you going to send the lava batteries I bought from you on Etsy? I am a little bit behind on Etsy. I get caught up on Etsy on the weekends usually. So today's Friday, so yeah, tomorrow. Saturdays are usually when I get caught up on Etsy. I have to just, I just, the way that I have to work to stay on top of stuff, because there's just so much shit coming at me at all times, is to batch stuff out. That's why on Etsy there's a 5-day shipping and handling time that I have built in there, so it tells you that in each item and or when you check out. I don't know when it does, but yeah, so like if you order on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, hopefully you haven't ordered on a Sunday, because then I go a day over. But yeah, did I already ship those out? Hold on, let me look. Oh, nope. Yeah, there they are. Oh my god, I missed that one. I'm sorry, dude. Dispatched by 4 days ago. Jesus Christ. My apologies. Kaiser, go into... send me a message on Etsy and find something else on the store that you like, and I'll throw it in for you for free. Sorry, brother. I don't know what happened. I missed that. that order got buried in between these two orders for micro Vs. I fucked up the stock number on the micro Vs, and I ran out of the damn things, and your order got sandwiched in between them and I didn't see it. My apologies. Yeah, go to my store, find something else that you want that's not $100, and shoot me a message and I'll throw it in for you. Sticker or something. Regardless, I'll throw in a one of the little magnets. But if there's something else on my store that you dig, let me know and I'll throw it in. Sorry, dude. Raise FPV says, built a 2S whoop, first whoop build. Noticed I'm getting a decent amount of jello when throttle is between 30 and 60. What can I adjust to address this? You can adjust the manual, the mechanical system. You've got either propellers that are bent up and like jacked up, or propellers that are out of balance right out of the box. So try a fresh set of propellers or a different brand or type of propeller. You've got motors that are out of balance or motor shafts that are bent. Certain motors, as we're going to talk about in a little bit, come from the manufacturers not really all that well balanced. Or you've got a frame that's broken or too wobbly, or like screws that are loose. Jello is a mechanical problem. You can't PID tune out jello. The PID tune will not vibrate the quad fast enough to really create jello in most cases. So every once in a while it will be. To rule that out, you can just grab your master multiplier and pull it down a bunch, and that'll rule out that, like, if it's at 1.0, pull it down to like 0.6. And then if you still have jello, you know that it's not a tune issue. Because by pulling that master multiplier down, as we were just talking about, the timing that the PIDs are going to attack problems is going to slow way down. Jello happens with high frequency vibrations. And so if you pull that timing way down, the vibrations are going to be a lot slower if there are any, and that's going to show you whether or not but like I said, 9 times out of 10, jello problems are mechanical in nature. Also, your camera mounting. Sometimes if a camera is not mounted solidly, it'll sit there and bounce back and forth in the mount. So you got to check that as well. There's a whole bunch of stuff for you to check. That'll take you a while. Alley Cat says, what exactly is black box logging in the easiest terms without over complicating? Black box logging is the certain flight controllers that have an onboard like storage chip that's like 8 megabytes or 16 megabytes, for example. It can log or just like record the data coming out of the gyro. And so the gyro is the chip on there that notices all of the motions, the pitch, the roll, and the yaw. And the gyros run at either 3,200 or 4,000 or 8,000 cycles per second. So minimum 3,200 times a second, that gyro is monitoring every little motion of the quad. All right? And so when you turn black box logging on, that data goes to the PID loop, but it also goes to the black box chip, and it records it. And in the black box tab of Betaflight, you can actually set the refresh rate. You can set it to record at 500 times a second, 1,000 times a second, 2,000 times a second. Usually we do it at about 1,000 times a second. That gives us data that's good enough. And so now you've got this log. You've got this log file with everything that the quad was doing when you flipped black box on. So now you've got that data, and you can dump it into Black Box Explorer, and that's just a program that visualizes the data. So it'll show you, like, on the pitch axis, you can like set one of the traces to be the pitch axis, and it'll be like a green line, and the green line will show you when it pitches forward or when it pitches backwards. And so in there, you can see, so like one of the things, you know, when we talk about like overcorrecting, right? We don't want the PID loop to be so aggressive that it overcorrects one way, This is me doing pitch. It overcorrects one way, it overcorrects the other way, it overcorrects this way, overcorrect. Brrr, that's that oscillation rate. That's bad. It eats the battery, it heats up the motors, it blows up everything. In the black box log trace, if it's doing that, you'll see it go like this. You don't want that. You want it to be flat. There's a little bit of this that you'll get, especially like when it's pushing against prop wash. So like a little bit is okay. But when there's a really big problem, you'll see this massive spike. And what's cool is it's separate, like pitch will be green, roll will be red, and then like yaw will be whatever, purple. And so you can look at the black box log and you can see, oh shit, my pitch is overactive. My pitch is bouncing all around. Let me back my pitch PIDs off a little bit. This is how you get a perfect tune. You can hear and you can see a lot of that bad behavior. So even without black box, you can get a pretty damn good tune. Brandon's Baked Beans is in the chat. He's an amazing PID tuner that uses black box. Brandon continues to be extremely kind to me with his time, and every once in a while when I have a rig that I'm having a hard time tuning by ear and by sight, I'll send Brandon a log file, and he'll pull it into black box and like actually take a look at it. Maybe I think at some point I've sent Brandon a file with a rig that was like tuned pretty good, and maybe he's willing to say in the chat like how close I was to like the perfect kind of tune. One of the things that I tend to do is I'll actually over tune a little bit, which is okay. So like, if we're talking about those traces, if there's like a little bit of wiggling in the trace, that will create a little bit of extra motor heat, and I can kind of hear it and kind of feel it and kind of see it. Less seeing it, more kind of hearing it. And that's kind of okay. But like, yeah, to get a tune absolutely perfect where there's no excess wiggling, which gives you the least motor heat, the most runtime, stuff like that, you have to do it with black box. It's just the doing it by ear and by feel. You will always be a little bit over-tuned or a little bit under-tuned, because you're having to make bigger jumps. Like when I move the sliders around, I go from like 1.0 all the way up to 1.0 up to 1.2. Brandon, with the log, he can have me go 1.05. And then he can see that it'll start to vibrate and he'll be like, nope, back to 1.0. And now it's perfect on 1.0. But for me, in that scenario, I would have gone to like 1.2 and been like, yeah, it flies better this way. I can kind of hear it, but that's okay. So, yeah, there you go. Great question. Islander FPV says, mahalo for another in-depth explanation. I'm here for the knowledge and Teddy. Nice. B-Mud Skipper says, I bought a 3D printer just to print canopies for Tiny Whoops and my O4. Have you printed much yet? I've printed this. This is all I've printed. And it's like pre-programmed into there. So I just like pushed 3 buttons and it started to print the damn thing. I did it during the 12-hour stream. I've been extremely busy this year, and extremely mentally fucked into a cocked hat. And so learning something new is very low on my list of... I don't like learning new things anymore. At 40... something I noticed in my 40s is new things make me very uncomfortable now. And like I'm really pushing myself to learn how to dance. That's like how to couples dance. That is like the one thing that I can have in my life right now that's pushing me to learn something new and putting me into like this uncomfortable place. Yeah, I don't know. It is what it is. I will for sure. But yeah, it makes me very uncomfortable. Brandon's Baked Beans says, CiottiFPV can tune all right, but I always find something I can gripe about. But you're pretty good, 100. Very cool. All right, I'm caught up on chat. So let's talk about the Mobula7 O4. All right, so the first like 8 batteries, 10 today's Friday. On, I want to say Monday's live stream, I think it was, we looked at the first 12 batteries that I flew on this thing. The first 8, I think it was, I flew outside. Some hard crashes, but not a lot of hard hits outside flying this thing. And it was totally fine. Then for batteries 9, 10, 11, and 12, I played all of this flight footage on that live stream, so you can look at every single crash that I put this thing through. For batteries 9, 10, 11, and 12, I flew it in the basement here. And the amount of crashes drastically increased, and the things that I was hitting got a lot harder, right? Walls, the television, shelving units, the main beam that runs across the ceiling, right? In the process of bashing this thing, and also the directionality of the crashes changed. When you're outside, like, you'll crash into the ground and you'll hit like this, and that puts the energy down here. A lot of the, not many outside crashes hit sideways to push energy into the propeller and then into the motor. And so flying outside, these motors were completely fine. Well, it's not these motors. It's these motors that are now off of it. Those first 8 batteries, these motors were completely fine. By the end of the 4 batteries that I flew in the basement here, 2 of these front motors had bent motor shafts. At some point, one of these front motors had a chunk of hair that I could not get out of it. HQ has, unfortunately, yet again, undersized the inner diameter of these 45mm tri-blade propellers so badly that they were impossible for me to get off of the motors with any of my prop poppers. I have all the different prop poppers. None of them could dig under the propeller to get the prop up and off. What I love that Happy Model pushed the propellers all the way down on the motors. That makes the propeller not bend the motor shaft as easily because it's a shorter lever. The problem, though, is that makes, if the inner diameter of the propeller is too small, that makes it impossible to get the prop poppers under there to safely remove the propellers. And so when that happens, the only way to get the propeller off is to grab the propeller, grab the motor, and twist it. And twist the propeller on the motor shaft to get it to loosen up so that you can pull the prop off. I did that when I got this big chunk of hair in here. While I was at it, I drilled the propeller out with my 1.5mm drill bit, which are available on my Etsy store and are super important for every single one of you to have if you're going to fly Tiny Whoops, because of exactly what I'm talking about here. I drilled the prop out and then I put it back on the motor. But the damage was already done. The damage was done in 2 situations. The first time the damage was done is when whoever at Happy Model built this rig pushed the propeller on. HQ, like I said, have screwed up and they've made the inner diameter of the propeller way too small. And so it's a bit much to expect Happy Model to fucking sit with a drill bit and drill out every single one of these props, right? They're not going to do that. And so best case scenario would be, actually, I guess, best case scenario would be if Happy Model stopped pushing the propeller all the way down and they left us a little gap so that when we bought a Mobula7 O4, we could take our prop popper and pull the propellers off and drill them out with our drill bits and then put them back on. The problem is that still, when they're pushing the propellers on, even though they're not burying them all the way down, they're having to push them on way too hard. The motor shaft and the motor bell are laser welded together. And that's not super, super, super strong. And so the problem starts with HQ. HQ has screwed up on these propellers, as they have with most of their other ones. Gemfan as well. The majority of Gemfan Tiny Whoop propellers are a little bit too tight. I think like the Gemfan 1210s, the biblades, the old school biblades, I think that they're the only Tiny Whoop propellers where the inner diameter is actually correct. And they go onto these motor shafts like firmly enough that they won't fly off, but not so firm that you're putting too much energy into the connection point between the motor bell and the motor shaft. And so fast forward to today. So I took this prop off once, I drilled it out, and I put it back on. But in the process of taking the propeller off, I had to twist it. It was the only way that it would come off. It was absolutely welded to the motor shaft. And when I twisted it to pull it off, that's when that was like the death blow for this motor. I drilled it out, I put it back on. That was towards the end of me flying. I flew one battery on this thing today, the daylight battery that I played at the beginning of the live stream. And towards the end of that battery, the motor shaft started to spin. I am holding the bell of this motor right now, and the propeller is welded. It's not really connected that. It's not that tight because I drilled it out, but it's tight enough that the motor shaft is now slipping on the motor bell. And so the real blame here is on HQ. But here's the problem. Every single one of these motor manufacturers does a slightly different thickness of motor shaft. Some of them do a motor shaft that's 1.50 millimeters. Some of them do 1.45. With the smaller motors we saw with the RCinPower motors, they're doing a motor shaft that's like 0.98 millimeters thick. Happy Model is like 1.0, around there, right? And so the prop manufacturers have this impossible situation where they certainly don't, and we got to see this with the Emax props, right? The Emax Avia props, their new Tiny Whoop propellers, they chose to make their inner diameter a little bit bigger. And if you put those props onto like the RCinPower motors with the slightly thinner motor shaft, they fly right off. And so it's coming back to this problem of a lack of standardization where, I mean, look, like, if you're going to say that it's a 1 millimeter motor shaft, make the fucking motor shaft 1 millimeter. If you're going to make that motor shaft 0.98, you're a jerk, right? And so, like, there is standardization. It's 1 millimeter and 1.5 millimeter. And so, like, I have a, maybe the Happy Model, well, not maybe. Let's look. I'll tell you exactly who we blame here. We'll figure out if HQ is to blame or... But see, even if HQ is to blame, they're dealing with the hand of cards that they've been dealt, which is that there is no standardization. And so for the prop manufacturer to make the inner diameter of the propeller smaller, that makes a lot of sense. Because if they make it smaller, then no matter what, at least that prop is going to work one time on a motor, right? If the inner diameter of the propeller is too big, it's a complete pain in the ass. So, yeah, see, no, Happy Model's not the problem. 1.48. God knows how accurate this caliper is, but still. 1.48, so they've slightly undersized their motor shaft, but still, these HQ props fit on these Happy Model motors way too tight. Way, way, way too tight. And that's what has caused this issue. And so at that point, I had to switch motors. Because, I mean, so technically, if I can ever get this propeller off, right, this propeller is super hard to get off now because I can't twist it to get it off because the goddamn motor shaft is spinning on the bell. I pushed the propeller all the way down, so now I can't get it's still pretty tight on here, and I can't get the prop popper under here. So I'm probably going to have to come in here and, like, with, like, flush cutters and, like, carve away at the hub of the propeller to try to break this prop, which is super annoying. So, all right. So that's the deal there. At this point, this motor is now worthless. I don't have any other 1102-ish motors that are 10,000-ish kV. So what I did is I had an extra set of beta FPV 1102 18,000s, the old school ones with the three spoke hub in 18,000 kV. And so I put these motors onto this rig, and I dropped the motor limiting down to like 75%. While I was at it, I put the 45mm bi-blades on. That was stupid. I shouldn't have changed so many things at once, but I assumed that these beta FPV motors would be okay. I then started to fly this, and it was very obvious, very quick, that nothing was okay. The first problem I ran into, which is super weird, is that, and I'm going to start playing the flight footage from this so that you can see what this looks like, is that all of a sudden, I'm just going to play all the flight footage from today. So you're going to get to see the first battery, which was the good battery, and then you're going to see at the end of this battery, the damn thing just wouldn't take off. Oh, hey, so I confirmed something else. Yeah, you have to use auto record with ARM in order to get this to record on board. There is no way to manually turn this thing on. So that is super annoying. Not the end of the world, but admittedly super annoying. So, yeah. So this is the battery that I flew earlier today. I was a little overexposed. Again, I got the manual settings all turned on, but I just wanted to... I just kind of wanted to get warmed up. And I was pretty sure... So this is with the front two motor shafts being bent. I was pretty sure that I would have a whole bunch of jello, but there's actually no jello. I am really impressed by this Happy Model O4, DJI O4 canopy. It's holding the camera nice and solid, which is maybe why... Like, there's lots of people with O4 having jello problems. I'm starting to think that those camera mounts are just too loose. And a nice solid camera mount like this Happy Model one is one of the keys to having no jello. Because, yeah, I've got none. I've got no jello on this thing. And both of these front motors, when I was flying this, are significantly banged up. Could be a propeller thing as well. These 45mm tri-blade props could be really well balanced, and maybe the folks that are having jello issue. One of the most common things for jello problems is propellers that are out of balance or beat up. Also, these Happy Model motors might be really well balanced as well. It's probably a little bit of everything. The Happy Model motors are probably really well balanced. These HQ 45mm tri-blade props are probably really well balanced. And this camera mount is probably holding the camera nice and solid, which I just sort of know from when I mounted it in the canopy. The white balance is fine. It's just overexposed. It's actually correctly exposed for the shadows. It's correctly exposed for the ground, but little tiny sensors like this don't have a ton of dynamic range. So, and this is a perfect, so this is now the motor shaft slipping. I'm going full throttle and it's barely getting off the ground. If I were to have flown the same battery with the O4 Pro, with the bigger, much better sensor that has a much wider dynamic range, there would be much more detail in the sky. This is a small sensor. This is a classic small sensor problem. So, yeah, I switched the motors over to these Beta FPV 1102 18,000s. These are an older motor. I'm pretty sure that these motors are not as well balanced. And so, as you're going to see, all of a sudden I start having short run times. The PID loop is freaking out. There's too many vibrations, basically causing all kinds of issues. And for like the next 3 or 4 batteries, I was having all manner of problems here. So this is now with the Beta FPV 1102s. Half Baked says something I'm interested in. On my O4 Lite Goggle 2 setup, manual recording before ARM records goggle only, but if I ARM first, oh, very cool, then manually press record, which is what I just did here, it records both. Very cool. Good fucking call, dude. I didn't think to try that. Very, very cool. I'm gonna move it back. Louis says something that's pretty much dead on the money. He says, it would be funny if all the people crying about soft mounting are actually completely wrong, LOL. That is almost, I can't say almost certainly the case, but there is a really good chance that that is the case. That has been a problem with O3 for a long time. See that low battery warning I just took off? Look at the voltage set. You can't see the voltage. It's in the bottom left corner. Behind my big old face. Let me do this. And yeah, so the voltage is sagging like crazy because the PID loop is overactive. There's too many vibrations. Also, you can see it kind of wobbling around. There's issues going on here. With the O3, these problems started with the O3. Everybody started to soft mount the O3 camera, and they were soft mounting it way too much. And when you soft mount a camera too much, whenever you soft mount a camera, it's going to have its own resonant frequency. The stiffness of the soft mounting is going to create a resonant frequency. And you have to be really careful, and you have to really tune that resonant frequency to be somewhere that it's not going to produce a lot of jello. Soft-mounted cameras are a problem. You never want to soft-mount a camera unless you absolutely have to. This is the perfect example. This is a completely hard-mounted camera, and we don't have any jello. In fairness, I haven't flown this in the middle of the day under bright sunshine, so I need to do that before I really talk about that. But so far, I've got no jello. It's just that, like, I keep doing chores and shit all day long until it's like 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, and then I'm flying when the light is a little bit lower, and that helps with jello. I'm also locking the shutter down, which also helps with jello. So yeah, jello typically happens at higher shutter speeds, which I haven't been able to run. And so I changed the motors over. I have these vibration problems, but I have another problem, which you're sort of seeing here. It happened a couple times when I did those flips and rolls. This is just me limping it around. You're going to see when I go full throttle here. Well, it's so goddamn dark that you can't see it. The problem that I started to have all of a sudden with these motors is that they're stalling out. For whatever reason, the startup power that I had set and the digital idle that I had set, for whatever reason on these Beta FPV 1102 18,000s was too low. And so the way that you can tell that is when I go zero throttle here, it'll like drop an arm for a split second and then it'll catch itself. That's a motor basically desyncing from dropping so low. The RPM is dropping so low that it runs out of power. These outboard motors don't have much power at super low RPMs. And so, yeah, for whatever reason, on these Beta FPV 1102 18,000s, I had to go in. I had flashed Bluejay 0.16 to it, which is my favorite Bluejay, but I had the startup powers completely maxed. The new version of Bluejay 0.21, those startup powers are more aggressive. So the first thing I did is flash this to Bluejay 0.21, and then I started moving those minimum and maximum startup power sliders up. I got them all the way maxed out, and it was still, it still didn't have enough startup power. At that point, I went into beta flight, and I started moving the digital idle up. I moved it from like 60 to 100, still no good. 100 to 150, still no good. All the way up to 200, still no good. What I noticed, though, is as I was moving that digital idle up in the PID tab, it wasn't making anything better, which is a problem that I've had on a couple different Beta FPV AIOs. And for whatever reason, on this AIO, the digital idle, just like with a couple different Beta FPV AIOs, the digital idle does not work. It doesn't do anything. And so I actually had to turn the digital idle off and then use the old school motor idle in the motors tab, and I moved it up to like 6, and it was a lot better, but it still wasn't quite there. The way that I test it is I just arm it at idle, and if it the motors, that's too low. That's going to potentially cause it to stall out. So then I moved the motor idle up to 8%. And then it was totally fine. And then it started spinning the motors reliably at idle. And if they spin reliably at idle and they don't start and stop, that's almost always going to be enough torque for them to not stall out when you go zero throttle in flight. And so this is now, I believe, this is now me with it proper, but it had gotten so goddamn dark that you can't see anything. So this is kind of worthless. But it's not dropping an arm and just being like a hot mess. So like, here's what I'm going to say. I cannot recommend. So these Beta FPV old school all black 1102 motors, I don't think they're good. I've had problems with these in the past not being all that well balanced. Many years ago, we're talking like 3-4 years ago, the motor manufacturers said, hey, we can't balance these little tiny micro motors. We just can't get the balancing mud in there. And so they just sold these motors that were not dynamically balanced at all. And that sucks. Like you can't. They don't come out of manufacturing balanced enough. Over the years, they've figured out how to get the balancing mud into these tiny little motors. And so nowadays, the current generation of micro motors, most of them, are balanced. And so I'm pretty sure that these old school all black Beta FPV 1102s, I don't think that they've changed their manufacturing method. I think they made a shitload of these and they're just sitting they're just sitting on the store shelves and they just keep selling them. And so I cannot recommend these old school Beta FPV 1102s, the all black ones, anymore. And I'm going to have to take them off of this rig. I am going to check one thing, though, before I take them off the rig, and so that was the last battery. On that battery, I'd figured out the motor stalling out issue, and it was flying around totally fine, which is great. But now that I'm going to take these motors off, I'm going to have to go through that process again, because I'm going to put different motors on. And that's another issue. It has been a while since I've had so many problems with the motors starting up. There's something else weird about these motors that caused me to have to go to the really aggressive Bluejay for the minimum and maximum startup power and crank the idle up. I do think that on this, I could totally be wrong about this, but it certainly looks this way. that on the Mobula7 AIO, the super, I don't know which AIO this is, but whatever, look up the Mobula7 O4 and you'll see which AIO this is. I think on this AIO, just like with a bunch of the beta FPV AIOs, that the digital idle doesn't work. It doesn't seem to work at all. And that should not have anything to do with the motors. I'm going to back that up because I'm going to move this onto a different frame with different motors, and I'll try it again. But it looks like that digital idle is not functioning, which I don't understand that at all. But I've run into it a couple of times before, and so I know that that's a real thing that exists in the world. So, yeah. The one thing I am going to try with these motors is taking these bi-blade. I wish I hadn't done these bi-blade 45mm props, but these motors were so high of a KV that I didn't want to put the tri-blades on. I'll figure out a way to get this tri-blade off of this motor with the slipped shaft, and I'm going to put those tri-blades on here. And so I still have a problem with vibrations on this rig. The run times are still pretty short. That battery only ran for 2 minutes and 40 seconds, and that was actually a 420 mAh battery, and I was not pushing it hard. So there is a vibration problem on this rig right now. It might be the propellers. I think it's the motors. It could be both, though. And so I have another one of these 420 mAh batteries that's still charged. So I'm going to switch the props over to the 45mm tri-blades and fly it and see what the runtime is like, and see if any of the. That's what you have to do to like properly isolate an issue. And so, yeah, this is, this is life with HD camera systems on small quads. And it's super annoying. But I'm going to change one thing at a time here and get to the bottom of it. And I'll fly this thing tomorrow or Sunday. And I'll have some more info for you on Sunday. But yeah, super frustrating day. Frame is still totally fine. One of the other things that could be the cause of these happy model motors getting beat up so quickly, the motor shafts bending so quickly, is that this is a really stiff frame. And so and it's got like the 4 supports, and so the frame being really stiff, that could be a part of the reason why we're not having jello issues, but it could also be dumping a lot of energy into the motors and hurting and bending the motor shafts up. Regardless, this is a rig that you're not going to want to fly inside the house anyway, and that's when these happy model motors got ruined. So if you buy one of these Mobula7 O4s, don't fly it in the house. It's way too heavy. It's way too powerful to fly in the house. Fly it outside, and you probably won't wreck your motors unless you have to take a propeller off. That is really like the biggest problem. And I let Jason from Happy Model know. I messaged him earlier today, and I explained the whole situation. And so he knows. There's really no solution, though. Like, the best case scenario is for him to tell his people that are building these things to not push the motor all the way down on the motor shaft, so that when we get them, we will have enough of a gap to drive our prop poppers in here to try to get the goddamn propellers off so that we can then drill them out. But, like, the problem is that, we represent, 1% maybe of people that are buying these things? And so for us, we're going to know that. For everybody else, they're not going to know to do that. They're going to start flying it around. The propeller not being far down on the motor shaft is going to put way more stress on the motor shaft, right? Longer lever, higher up on there, and it's going to actually bend the motor shaft sooner. So they probably, if I were them, I wouldn't do that, even though everybody else kind of does that, right? Like, this is one of the first times that I've ever seen a bind and fly come with the motors, with the propellers pushed all the way down in the motor shaft. And so, yeah, this is super annoying. My fingers are killing me from trying to get this propeller off. I keep trying, and then my fingers hurt. Oh yeah? Now your back's gonna hurt because you just pulled guard duty. Or no, landscaping duty, not guard duty. Yeah, see this, it's just, it's buried, man. This is the clone popper. It has the thinnest little fork here and the best chance of digging in there, but it's just not, it won't get in there. Let me try one of the other ones. Oh, nope. So yeah, there's that, which is extra annoying. That was my day. What did you guys do today? Let me scroll back up here and get caught up on chat now that I'm done ranting and raving. Off Axis says, I wish I lived or could visit CiottiFPV. You have a printer working its ass off behind you like me. 5 printers constantly. I just have to learn the software. I just have to learn the slicer software. And like, there's just so much other stuff. I'm not like desperate to print anything right now. And so learning that slicer software is pretty low on my list of priorities, unfortunately. But I will get there. At some point, there'll be something that I need to print, and I'll go on YouTube and I'll type bamboo slicer software how to, and I'll spend a half an hour watching somebody explain it to me, and then I'll spend another half an hour screwing around with it, and then I'll be good to go. But yeah, like at the moment, I don't have anything super pressing that needs printing. Man, I should have drilled this propeller out more, because it is really, really fighting me to come off of here. It doesn't help that I took the motor off the frame, but still. I mean, this motor is kind of wrecked anyway, so I could just grab this. I could just put this motor in the fucking vise in the garage and just demolish it. But like, yeah, I cannot get it off. Allfaxis also says, is a prop washer a good idea? Nylon or something? No, because it would take the space up. We need a gap. We need nothing down there, right? When you buy a clone popper, Jesse gives you this little plastic fork thing, and he says, hey, you can put this little fork thing down on the motor shaft, and then when you push the propeller down, it'll bottom out on that little fork, and then you pull the fork out, and now you've got your nice little gap. But then your propeller is sitting up on the motor shaft. I don't like that. I like the propeller all the way down on the motor shaft. If you're going to do that, you can't hammer the propeller down, because this is what happens. Islander FPV says, I'm curious how much variance there is in motor shaft diameter. Someone should put the micrometers on a bunch of motors and see what they are. I've pushed enough propellers that I have drilled out to the exact same inner diameter. I've pushed enough propellers onto enough different motors to tell you that there is a significant variance. RCinPower has the thinnest motor shafts for sure. A little bit thicker than them are Beta FPV, VCI, and Newbie Drone. And then Happy Model actually seems to have the thickest motor shafts. You can just tell, how much force you have to put on a propeller to put it on the motor tells you exactly how thick that motor shaft is. Louis says, I was looking at thrust to weight ratio calculations today, and they're too complicated for the specs we have alone. But do you think the thrust to weight ratio correlates to feel of the quad? Thrust to weight ratio has to do with a lot. For sure, the feel. Also, it has a lot to do with the response time. And so, yeah, it has a lot to do with everything. olden days of tiny whoops, they flew like shit because the thrust to weight ratio was just nasty. Nowadays we're up closer to like 5-to-1, 6-to-1, 7-to-1 thrust to weight ratio, and that's why these things fly so good. 5-inch rigs are in the realm of like 9, 10, or 11-to-1. That's why they fly like such absolute monsters. We don't want that high of a thrust to weight ratio for flying inside. We don't need all that power. So where tiny whoops are at now is about perfect. You want as much power to weight ratio as possible before, up until the point where your throttle resolution sucks, right? For the space that you're flying in. If we take one of these 65mm whoops and we go fly it outside, it feels like shit and we want more power because we're outside and it's a much bigger space, right? And so that's why these like 2S 75mm rigs fly or feel so good outside, because they have a higher thrust to weight ratio. So yeah, it's super important. Power to weight is super, super, super important. Flyborg says, what motor do you prefer for 75mm? That is too open-ended of a question. It depends on analog versus HD. It mainly depends on that because that drastically changes the all-up weight. It also depends on 1S or 2S. Douglas 6 says, what are the manufacturing tolerances on shaft diameters, or are we just too cheap? Nobody knows. Nobody talks about it. I just micrometered the Happy Model 1102, and the shaft was 1.48. I wish they were all 1.5, but they obviously aren't. Half Baked with the cool tip on when to press record. Cold Power says, we hard mount a camera because it minimizes jello. We soft mount a flight controller because it has an accelerometer. Now the cameras have accelerometers. Lesai. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Shit. Yeah, one of the reasons that these cameras are getting soft mounted is because they have gyros or accelerometers in them. And then if you want to run them through Rocksteady, if you want to turn Rocksteady on or run them through GyroFlow, yeah, that's quite the nightmare. I forgot about that. Yeah, that sucks. Brandon's Big Bean says, word on the street is that the tape on the MIPI cable interferes with Rocksteady. I've seen some people peeling it back 10 to 15 millimeters from the light camera. The tape? Why would that have anything to do with it? I still haven't had a chance to play around with Rocksteady, so once I do, Oh, that's super annoying. That's super annoying. I don't know, to be honest though, I don't know if I would ever really Rocksteady this footage, because Rocksteady does not do horizon leveling. And I spent a lot of time learning to fly really smooth, but it would be nice to maybe put this footage through GyroFlow to put horizon leveling on, but the problem with that is that the O4 light camera has a fairly narrow field of view. Horizon leveling really has to crop in like crazy. And so I might never stabilize the footage from O4 light. And I don't necessarily know if any of you should either. Again, because of that field of view. If we had a super wide field of view, it would be one thing, but we don't on the O4 light. So, yeah, there's that. Skyotic says, do you think that the cold would also be giving me jello outdoors? Cold shouldn't have anything to do with it. Inside it seems fine with the femto, but it's like 17 degrees Fahrenheit. Oh, Pablo femto. Okay. So it's hard to tell. LOL. Yeah, it could on a rig with a soft mounted camera. The temperature is going to affect the durometer, or the hardness or softness of the soft mounting rubber grommets. And so, yeah, that could totally have something to do with it. For sure. And there ain't a goddamn thing you can do about that. Denzel the Trouble says, oh, avoid learning stuff on YouTube. All those streamers are weirdos. In my short time looking up 3D printing stuff on YouTube, one of the bigger not streamers, but content creators on there was a guy that regularly wears Google Glass. And I was like, oh, brother, don't do that. Don't do that. Like, I get it, man. I get it. You spent a whole bunch of money on it. Believe me, I get it. When I spend a bunch of money on shit, I use the hell out of it. But, like, nobody else is wearing Google Glasses anymore, buddy. Take a hint. Cold Power says, Slicer is like printing any document, file opened, proof it, click send, print. I'll figure out one of these days. As soon as I have something to print. Dead Stiff says, remove the E-clip and take the bell off. That should make it easier to get the prop off. Why is that? It's worth a shot. I think that's going to make it harder, though, because then there's just going to be a stick coming out the bottom of the bell. But at that point, what I can do is just push the motor shaft up through, and that'll allow me... Maybe that's what he's talking about. Yeah, I'll just be able to push the motor shaft up and through, and then I can get the prop popper, the clone popper, onto the damn thing, and that'll push it right off. So there's the C clip. I refuse to call it an E clip. I just refuse. All right. So now, since this motor shaft has slipped, I should be able to just, yep, there it goes. Just pops right up and out. And so, yeah, good call. Good call. That will only work on a motor that's ruined. On a motor that's not ruined, you're going to be like torquing on the motor shaft and you're going to potentially bend it. But for the most part, a propeller being stuck on like this, like really not being able to remove it, because, whoa, that is really on there. I don't want to break another clone popper. The fork on the clone popper is really skinny. So I'm going to use this old school prop popper from Tiny Whoop. Although I'm actually not going to use this because I remember I bent the pin at some point and I had to bend the pin back, and I'm going to have to really push on this. So, nah, actually, you know what I'm going to do? Since this is ruined anyway... Ooh, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to push this back together. I'm going to take these, which have textured jaws on them. And again, this is fucked anyway. And I'm just going to crank on this, and now I can twist the prop to get it off. And there it is. So that's how to do it, since the bell is ruined anyway. Clamping down on the bell like that with these, if I put this back into the stator on those bushings, it would be a wreck. But, yeah, this is ruined anyway, so. I'll tell you what, man, this thing flew great as it was out of the box. It's just, they need to figure out the propeller situation. Happy Model has already undersized their motor shafts a little bit, which is really good. But HQ is making the inner diameter of the props way too tight. Way too tight. Cole Power says, sure, there's a nuance to the art, but that's a task for future Ciotti. At 8:18, he said that. What were we talking about 10 minutes ago? Cole Powers also says 12-to-1 thrust ratio. Too much for you. Just motor limit to 15%. Captain FPV says, have you tried your chip lifter? I haven't. You know, I haven't used the chip lifter in forever, but the chip lifter is thicker. The forks on the chip lifter are thicker than the clone popper. If you hold them next to each other, the clone popper is the thinnest little fork, so it's got the best chance of digging it in there. But yeah, I pushed the propellers really all the way down on the motor shaft. I'll put this back together here. Driftaholic says, if you fly at 100p, I'm going to assume you mean 100 frames per second, and conform it to 30 or 60, you will need to be using 1/100th frame rate or longer if it allows for more than 360 degree shutter angle. 60p, 1/60th equals 30p, 1/60th when you drop half. I'm completely lost. Driftaholic, say that differently. I'm completely lost in the sauce on that. Cole Powers says, if you're talking about Zach Friedman, it's not Google Glass. He built that himself. Ah, okay. That's why he's wearing it. He should still not wear it. It looks ridiculous. Denzel Terrell says, Zach Friedman is a genius. They aren't Google Glass. He made them from scratch. I was talking about all streamers. Okay. He does seem like a fucking genius. I don't doubt that he's a genius, but like he's got a teleprompter on them. Well, I don't know. I guess I'm just a jerk because I can't watch somebody that wears. I did watch a bunch of his stuff, but it bothers me. It just bothers me, man. I don't know why. Maybe I'm just that. I guess I'm just that shallow, but that's okay. You know, we're all allowed to be unique people. I'm not gonna get into 3D printing, and so I don't need to. I won't need to watch a lot of his stuff. So it's all good. Look, I didn't go into his comments and say like, dude, you look like such a douchebag with that thing on your head. What an asshole. And that's all that matters, right? He'll never find out that I'm talking shit. AZ Lone Wolf says, I broke the little ELRS copper antenna. Can I just solder that back on, or am I shit out of luck? Yep, you can solder it right back on. Cole Powers says, who else wants to jump on the correct CiottiFPV train? You guys all always do that. Levster says, in my goggles, it says Dshot telemetry when I arm. What does that mean? ESC kaput? Does it then arm? If it doesn't arm, reinstall. I think what that means is that you have RPM filtering turned on. Or no, I'm sorry. You have bidirectional Dshot turned on in the motors tab, but then your ESC firmware does not support RPM telemetry. So go into BlueJ and reflash it. If it's not on BlueJ, you got to get it onto BlueJ. If it's on BlueJ, just reflash it, and hopefully that'll help. RC Thrills says 9th hole at 9. What's that mean? Bork Bits says use heat soldering iron on shaft. Nah, we good. Muddertson said that's a good idea though. Maybe. Might make it worse. Probably make it better. Muddertson says I have the Weebleed PPP prop thing and I've never used it. How's it compared to the other ones? My one complaint about the Weebleed prop pooper is that on the fork, the forks are a little bit farther apart, and certain propellers on 1mm motor shafts. Well, no, it's just certain propellers. The forks are too, like if the hub of the propeller is too small, like on a lot of these HQ ultralights, the forks are too far apart and they'll slip right off. They're not close enough together to grab the little tiny hubs on some of these HQ props. They're fine on the GemFan props, but yeah, on some of the HQ ultralight props, it won't work. And so yeah, the Tiny Whoop clone popper is my favorite. And then there's the old school Tiny Whoop prop popper, which is kind of nice. Cole Power says he quoted, ninth hole at 9. Wow, it's been, I forgot about that quote. That I read it and it didn't register. That's a fucking deep cut, bro. RC Thrills has watched Happy Gilmore more times than I have, and that's a goddamn accomplishment. That is a deep cut. Who says that? Shooter McGavin says that to Happy the first time that he meets him to play the joke on him. And the sprinklers turn on. That's a deep cut, bro. Good for you. Good for Cole Powers, too, catching it. Driftaholic says, if you record 100 frames and 1/100th dropping half the frames in Premiere would give you 50 frames per second, 1/100th, and probably solve your complaint about O4. I'm way closer to understanding what you mean now. So what you're saying is that, yeah, I think we're saying the same thing, is that you got to set, with these higher frame rates, you can't have your sequence set to 30 frames. And like that's what I don't like. I really prefer to edit and watch stuff in 30 frames a second. I don't like the way that 60 frames a second looks. I also don't like the file sizes doubling, all the other nonsense. And so I think we're saying the same thing. Yeah, if you record 100 and you lose half the frames in Premiere, would give you 50 frames, 100th, and probably solve your complaint about O4. Yeah, no, it's this is going to be a complaint forever, and until the latency is good at 30 frames, I'm not going to like this ever. And I don't think anybody's been able to make the latency good at those lower frame rates, right? Yeah, this is it was a thing, man. This is a thing. I'm annoyed by this, but you know, everything in FPV is annoying, so why shouldn't this be any different? Putting these little C-clips and washers over here. So, I mean, now I have an extra 1002, 10,000 kV, 1102, 10,000 kV Happy Model stator. That sucks. I'd rather not. Driftaholic says, you still want to use 360-degree shutter if you want to drop the frames down to 30 from 100. Right, that's what I'm doing. I'm matching up my shutter speed with the frame rate. So when I'm at 100 frames, I'm at 1/100th. When I'm at 60 frames, I'm at 1/60th. That's the way that you get the least possible gap in between each frame. This is the motor shaft. This motor shaft's bent anyway, so it's going in the garbage. And then I save the little bell and stick it on my toolbox. Here's the bell collection on the toolbox. Look at them all there. Bells that motor shafts have slipped on. What I forgot to mention before is there is this Loctite metal on metal compound. It's like Loctite 685. I could have taken this motor apart and put that in between the shaft and the bell and put it all back together, and it would have gotten me back up in the air. But I've done that a bunch of times. It inevitably starts slipping again. So I'm not doing it anymore because I only get like 5 or 10 more batteries before it starts. It's just once the shaft has slipped on the bell, it's over. I also did just notice that this motor shaft is not knurled. I'm going to follow up with Jason. Jason actually got back to me. I just measured the diameter of your motor shaft during my stream, actually, and you're at 1.48, which is great. I guess HQ is all the way down at 1.45 or something. I also noticed that the motor shaft isn't knurled or splined like the 0702s. That would help a ton, but I assume that you already have a million of these motors made. Yeah, so the splining of the motor shaft. So right now the motor shaft is smooth and then the bell is smooth. And so they laser weld around there. And so when I twisted it to get that propeller off, you can put a lot of force into twisting. And so that's probably what did the majority of the damage. A lot of these 0702s now, so knurling is typically like our here's what knurling looks like. It's like a crosshatch pattern, right? And so that's best case scenario is that they could knurl the motor shaft. This way it has strength up, down, and on the rotational. It looks like it's too small for them to do that because they haven't. But what they have been doing on some of the newer Happy Model 0702s is they spline the motor shaft. And so they dig in. If the motor shaft is here, they dig. And so that helps with rotational, right? If it's splined like this, if these are each one of those digs, and then you put the bell on, you spline the bell at the same time, right? So the bell has these, and then so they go together like that. And so that helps a ton with the rotational. So that's another part of the problem with these Happy Model motors is that the motor shaft is not splined. The motor shaft and the bell are not splined. If they were, that would help with when you rotate the propeller. The splines don't help with jamming the propeller on really hard. When you push the propeller on really hard, those splines ain't going to do shit. And you can very easily push this motor shaft down through the bell because there's no C-clip holding it. They're not using a C-clip on top of the motor, and that's not great either. With a C-clip on top of the motor, like, wow, none of the 1002s. I have a bunch of 1002s up here. Flywoo, Happy Model, Sub 250. None of these have C-clips up on top. The 702 motors, most of them have a C-clip up on top. See that C-clip up there? See it? And so if you push really hard down on that motor shaft, that C-clip will hit the bell. Here's the problem though. There's a little bit of a gap. This camera's not going to pick it up. But there is a tiny little bit of a gap between that C-clip and the motor bell. And so if you were to push that motor shaft down hard enough, it would break that laser weld. And then, yes, it would push that C-clip into the bell, but you've already broken that laser weld, and so you've already hurt the motor shaft and the bell. And so the C-clip on top does help, but since you can't get it perfectly flush immediately, it's good, but it's not it's not a total solution, but it would certainly help. Cold Power says, if you shoot 60 frames with shutter speed 1/60th and drop every other frame, you effectively get 30 frames per second with proper exposure. Yeah, that is very true. That is very true. Said it the other day with 120 to 60 as an example. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Which is, and what's interesting about that is that's what I was doing with the 60 frame per second 4K footage. I think there's something else going on, because there still seem to be big gaps and we can see it here. So this is 4K 60 footage, and if I track forward, right? And again, we'll use Sage's car. There's still as me smacking into the ground. The jumps are still pretty big. Like, look at that jump. Look how big that jump is. Basically, like, thus far, all of the flight footage that has come off of the and that's straight off the camera right there. All of the flight footage that has come off of this, it has that flip book look. Maybe when I flew this, I didn't have the shutter speed locked down. I got to do more testing. I just the footage from today. Hold on. The footage from today. I can drop this in real quick. Day 2. It didn't record. It didn't record. I'll do more testing. We'll get to the bottom of it. But yeah, when I slowed that footage down, when I slowed that 100 frame per second footage down, those gaps between the frames really went away, and it makes me almost think that, like, and this is total speculation, but it makes me almost think like the camera is always running at 100 frames, but then and then when I drop the shutter speed down to 1/60th, it's not actually doing that. I don't know. It seems weird, but I'll get to the bottom of it. There's a chance that this was on auto shutter and it was cranking the shutter speed up to 120, 160, 1240, because these were the first 2 batteries that I flew. And yeah, I don't remember if I'd locked the shutter by that point. And I don't want to do this with any of the footage from the goggles because it's different. It's like locked in at 1080. Yeah, I gotta test it more. We'll figure it out. RC Throw says, is this refresh rate just a problem because you stream and try to show on YouTube, aka I didn't stream, so the refresh rate isn't as big of a deal? No, I just like the way that 30 frames looks. It's just a more, like, this is why movies are not, 90% of movies are not filmed in 60 frames. There have been a couple movies that have been filmed in it. There was a Will Smith action movie that was filmed in and played back in the theaters at 60 frames, and watching 60 frame per second footage has, all right, so like sports, right? Like football, there's actually a really good YouTube video about this, the cinematic look of 20, they were talking about 24 frames, but 30 frames is pretty close, and it kind of same kind of deal here. with 60 frames a second, it looks like football. It looks like this like super true to life. Yeah, like it looks and feels like you're there more. Whereas 24 and 30 frames, it just looks like a movie. It looks way more cinematic, right? Like when we say cinematic 7,000 times, this is kind of that look, and I like it. I like it better. The live streams and all this shit, like I don't care about much of this because YouTube hammers the hell out of the quality so bad that it doesn't matter. But when I sit down to do an edit and I spend 2, 3, 4, 10, 20, 30 hours on an edit, I become really, really, really sensitive to this kind of stuff. And yeah, I really, really, really noticed it last night, and it was bugging the shit out of me. So it's, I'm gonna try really hard to figure it out, and I'll take you guys along for the ride. But for most people, they don't care if until you do. You don't care until you notice the difference. Patrons, again, you've got a link to this video. You can watch it in full 4K, and I think you'll see. I think you'll see when I go to 50% speed, and then when I go to 30% speed, I think you'll really start to notice those gaps in between the frames. And then if you go back and you watch the flight footage, I think you'll, at the beginning, the 4K, everything at 100% speed, I think you'll start to notice this like flip book kind of thing. And when I say flip book, what I mean is like, you know, drawing like a little stick figure in like a little book, and then, right, you see the stick figure like animation, like individual frames, right? It's like it doesn't smoothly go. There's like these jumps in between each. Fair warning, once you see it, you can't unsee it. So if you're living in a blissfully unaware world right now, maybe don't look for it. Because once you've seen it, you can't unseen it. And you'll start to see it all over the place. We deal with it in FPV because we move a lot. You drop a camera down on a tripod, and you don't really deal with it unless your subject is like flying across the frame. But even in that case, you don't notice it as much because your whole frame, right? Like me right now, this entire frame is static. Everything is static. And then if I take my hand and I move it, my hand only represents a little bit of it. With FPV, we take the whole fucking frame, everything in the frame, and shift it all. And so if there's gaps, like it becomes much more noticeable. Denzel the Terrible says, just got my first tube of E6000 in the mail. What should I glue with it? Everything. E6000's the best. Glue all of your UFL antennas down. Driftaholic says, looking at the latency chart on Russell's video, I would fly 4K 48, 1/48, and then slow it to 24 in Premiere for YouTube or a gig. So here's what's interesting about that. I hate the way FPV looks in 24 frames a second. 24 frames a second, it kind of causes the same problem. It's just slow enough where even if there's not a jump, but even if like an object doesn't jump from here to here, it's the frame rate is too slow and there's like too much motion blur. In my and many others of folks that do cinematic FPV stuff, 30 frames a second is perfect. It's kind of just right. I hate when a producer or an editor, whoever is hiring me, asks for me to fly in 24 frames, because I have to specifically, I mean, I don't have to, but I choose to fly a lot slower, because if I fly fast in 24 frames a second, the motion blur is just ridiculous, because you're at 1/24th or 1/48th, and that's a little too slow. My favorite look is 30 frames a second at 1/60th. And when you do that, you lose that half frame in between, right? I'm shocked that flying this in 60 frames and then dropping it down to 30. I'm so surprised that I'm having this much of a hard time with it, which is what really makes me think that the shutter speed was on auto. So I'm hoping that when I fly tomorrow in the daylight, now that this thing works again, it's set to 4K 60. I'm hoping that, yeah, it looks better and it doesn't have that flip book look, but we'll see. Borkbits says bad O4. Nope, O4 is good. This is just a thing. Driftaholic says The Hobbit did 4K 48 and it was a flop, but I think Peter Jackson messed up using 270-degree shutter angle. 270? The fuck is 270? Oh, so that's 48 to 60, I guess then, right? So he filmed it in 60 and then dropped down to 48. 4K 48. Yeah, no. Any movie that you want to be remotely cinematic, it's got to be 24 or 30. Going up above 30, it just doesn't work. Corridor Crew is who has the. If you want to dive into this, Corridor Crew 24 FPS. Will that find it? No. Try 60. I'm pretty sure Corridor Crew has the video about it. I could totally be wrong. Damn it. Corridor Crew frame rate. This might be it, but it doesn't look like I've watched this, so I don't think that it is. Damn it. It might not have been them. Oh, it might be this. Frame Rate Ultimate Guide. This might be it. Because I've watched a chunk of this. Oh, hold on. Hold on. Frame rate. This will find it. I watched it a long time ago. It was really well done, though. Oh, man. Damn. Maybe I wasn't logged in when I watched it? Weird. Yeah, I don't know. I guess it could be in here. I mean, just doing like a quick search, I'm sure you can find somebody that dives into it and does a really good job explaining it. Certainly better than me. Looks like Jason's gonna talk to HQ Prop to try to figure it out. Oh, he's gonna send me an extra set of motors. These motors performed really well. Did a quick edit from my first 2 batteries. Send him a link to the edit. He's close to a gangly ganger. We hook him up. Jason has always been like super cool with me. Jason from Happy Model, that is. Right. So yeah, that's everything I got. Oh no! Hey, whoa! Okay, just the audio's gone. Should be audio. Is there audio for you guys, but not me? Should be audio for me. Why is there no audio for me? What the hell? It's nice that you guys had audio. That's weird. I don't know why I don't have any audio. That's annoying. I love the audio to that. Huge thank you to Brain 3D for sending me some stuff. Bunch of O4 stuff, actually. They've got... This isn't all of their O4 stuff, but this is a lot of their O4 stuff. They've got a great big canopy for O4 that you can use the that little front piece that the O4 light camera comes with to put in there, and then it's got adjustable up tilt on the bottom. Look at this. Look how cool that is. See that down there? There it is. See that little slot on the bottom where my finger is? That's for adjustable up tilt. How cool is that? It's also got a nice big port for the antenna to stick up. And of course their quality is like awesome. We've got... Yeah, I'm not going to try to use this camera. It's going to drive me absolutely insane with the focus or lack thereof. Oh my god, that's 9 o'clock. I got to blitz through this and then roll. I was planning on doing a shorter live stream. This is 6.3 grams. We've got a couple of antenna O4 Pro antenna holders that go onto the standoffs, right? And it's got like a nice little angle to it. Right there, I don't have the standoff centered, but it's got a nice little angle to it, so you can put that right on the back of your frame, and then have those sitting up all nice and protected, all loud and proud like. And then this is the one that I really like. This is my favorite of the antenna holding O4 prints. These little tubes here are notched for a zip tie to grab on, and then they're split down the front. So you can just take your antenna and just push it into this little tiny tube, and then zip tie it down, and it'll hold the antenna. This is what I will be using. This little piece is 2 grams, which is awesome. This is great. This is the best little antenna holding setup that I've seen for O4. Absolutely love this. And then it's minimalist, so it'll fit different widths of rear standoff. This is the one. This is absolutely awesome. They've got a couple different camera plates for the front, for the Pro camera, that set it back a little bit, and then they just drop down over the standoffs. These are very cool. These are what I'll be using on the Cineexplore, so you'll get to see these. They've got, this is for the light camera to give you a couple of holes to screw it down with. So the regular light camera without that little front piece on it, this drops right into it. And then they've got a couple little slots here that you can drive screws into. These are really, really, really cool. These weigh 1.5 grams. And then this is, he's got a little soft mount-ish hardware set for the AOS frames, and that's what this is. So again, thank you to Brain 3D. Very, very cool of them to sponsor me a while back, and they've always been amazing about sending me stuff when I do. Oh, and then this one. This is for the AOS frames. It's same kind of deal. It puts the antennas up at a 45, but it's not as squishy. I don't like this one as much. This is the one right here. This is the way to hold the double O4 antenna setup from the O4 Pro. This is awesome. This is cool too. It's a little bit more solid, but it doesn't have that spot for you to put the zip tie around. This is the one that you want here. Thank you, Brian at Brain. Very cool of you. And then a package from Jake FPV over on Discord. On my in the Patreon only section, he listed 10 RunCam Nano 3 cameras for sale, and I snagged them, not to steal them from all you guys, but because I want to do another camera I want to add to my camera comparison and show you guys all, hopefully, all of the different versions of the RunCam Nano 3. Once I'm done with these, they will be up on my Etsy store, but I need to get a whole bunch of these cameras because Apparently, there are like 4 different versions of the RunCam Nano 3, and they all look a little bit different. And so I'm going to get a bunch of them. I'm going to plug them all in, point them at the toolbox, just like with the other camera testing. And then, yeah, we'll be able to look at, hopefully, all 4 different generations of the RunCam Nano 3. And then I'll put them up my Etsy store. So that's super cool. And it looks like he also threw in a little Hachidori V2 frame, which is super cool. I don't know when I'll use this, but if I want to do a... if at some point I want to check out a little tiny no prop guard setup, this is the frame that I'll do with it. Thank you, dude. Very cool of you. Lots of RunCam Nano 3s in here. There's a little packaging job he did, putting a little thing. Very cool. I appreciate it, brother. And then the last thing, which it's not like mailbag related, but Craig. Where's the email? Where's the email? Where's the email? Didn't I just clear these fucking emails out? Jesus. Craig Meyer has done HTML live stream transcripts, which are really, really cool. And this is what it looks like. And then you can click the time codes here, and it'll actually open up the live stream itself. And so Craig is working on these. It's very, very cool. You can just do a quick Command F and then search for whatever, and it'll highlight it, and you can go through, and it's like the full transcript of the live streams, which is super awesome. Craig had a couple questions. I'm trying to remember where I was talking to him. It's I think maybe I was talking to him on Instagram, perhaps. Yeah, it was. No, that ain't it. That's not where I was talking to him. Where the hell was I talking to him? It was like the hardest part of my job is figuring out where the conversations are with all you guys. Oh, okay. Looks like I'm also talking to him on Discord. It looks like he might be able to automate it, which is cool. It's not automated yet. But he says, do you think it needs a full text search interface, Google style, so that people can find the exact sections that they're interested in? And I said no, because I think all of you guys realize that you can Command or Control F, like I just did, to have it highlight it, right? And then he also said, how far should I go back? So far, he's gone back to October 1st, 2024. I don't think we need to go back before 2024, right? Like, before 2024, I don't know if there's any value to much of that stuff because the year is going to be so old. So like if he's able to automate it, if it did it like for all of 2024 and then moving forward, I think that would be super awesome. Once it's good to go, this will be a Patreon post. And so patrons will be able to access full transcripts to live streams from 2024 and then moving forward. And yeah, you can just do a quick Command F in each one of those. Oh, maybe what he's talking about is the ability to search all of them so that you can search for Mobula7 and then it'll hit all of those all at once. Yeah, I guess that would be kind of important. I'll talk more to him about it. I don't know if I haven't seen him in the chat yet. Let me get caught up on chat and then I'm going to go. Avatar 2 mixed 24 frames per second and 48 sequences. I noticed them almost every time it changed. Most people didn't. Most people won't notice. I haven't seen it yet. Now I'm going to see it. Now I want to see it to see if I can tell. Matt Anderson says there was a movie called Public Enemies where few action scenes were in high frame rate. I remember watching in the theater and being like, what the hell am I even seeing? Yeah, it's pretty... Once you notice it, you'll always notice it. It's interesting. Louis says, what does increasing, decreasing motor size do, and why would you do it? More power and or more cooling. Also, what's the difference between changing diameter versus height? Secondary question, would 1003 be too much for a 75mm 2S? Yes, you want 1002 or 1102. You don't need to go all the way up to 1003. What's the difference between changing diameter and height? Long story short, the height of the motor adds a lot of extra power and no extra cooling. More width adds a little bit of extra power and a lot of extra cooling. The ratio that you want is 3:1 for freestyle or racing. Let's say this, 3:1 for racing, 4:1 for freestyle, 5 or 6:1 for Cinewhoops, carrying like a mega payload, because you want that extra width, because on a 3-inch rig, 120 GoPro is heavy as shit. So you need a 5 or 6:1 ratio for all of the extra cooling. The wider the motor is, the more of the motor is in the airflow to keep it cool. Driftaholic says, in CR's chart, he has parentheses showing that in some modes the camera runs at double the recorded frame rate. Could this be the reason your footage is borked? It totally could be. Where does he show that? That I might watch his entire review again. I didn't catch that on the first time through. Driftaholic says, I agree, 24 frames per second looks bad. Moves are too fast and they break cinematic panning rules. Arizona Lone Wolf says, any issue using the RCinPower 1002 on the Mobula7 seemed noticeably smaller than the Beta FPV 18,000 I was using. It depends. If it's a heavy-ass Mobula7, it might not be enough motor. The Beta FPV is an 1102. But if it's a reasonable weight Mobula7, it should be totally fine. Nate Adams says it was 4K 48 to do 3D comfortably. Oh, interesting. 3D. Oh my god. What a nightmare that was. DCDK, it didn't tag me, but I just happened to see it. He says, love from Denmark, my friend, from a proud patron. Thank you for the support, brother. Metal Dirtson says, Spider Sugar said he's not streaming tonight in case you end up going along. Nah, I gotta roll, man. I gotta go get some dinner with Maggie. Dave S says, how's the... I don't have to, but I really want to. Dave S says, how's the Cockroach 75 frame? It's too fragile. Don't do it. Morton Upshot with the last comment of the live stream. He says, these videos you referenced are on Patreon or Discord in the Patreon section. What videos that I referenced? As quick as you can, Morton. What video are you... When you say these videos you referenced, what's that mean? Frame rates. No, they're other people's. They're other people's videos. I don't remember who it was. I don't remember the content creator on YouTube where I watched it. But if you just search YouTube for like 24 FPS versus 30 or like versus 60 or something like that, you'll find a bunch of. Or if you start looking for like shutter angle, look for videos surrounding shutter angle. They will explain what it all kind of means. Thanks for hanging out, friends. I'll see you again Sunday at 3 o'clock Eastern. Gerald Undone, that might be the one, Driftaholic. That sounds awful familiar. He might be the guy. Yeah, I'll see you Sunday at 3. Hopefully it's not pouring with rain tomorrow so I can do some flying and get to the bottom of some other stuff. I just spit. Hopefully you guys didn't see it. Here's some, again, on my Discord in the Patreon Hangout channel is a link to this edit that I'm almost done. Check it out. It's the first couple of batteries with this thing. It's pretty damn good. Love you. Bye. This footage is all useless. Here's the one before the motor bell and motor shaft parted ways. Yes, it's overexposed. That's okay, though. Love you, bye! Okay, OBS doesn't work.